Sony is the parent company to Bungie, and their struggles in the live service video game market are noteworthy to say the least. In fact, it's because of their live service struggles that they decided to acquire Bungie for that juicy $3.6 billion price tag, in hopes that Bungie would help Sony figure out the live service market within this video game vacuum that's been created where basically every game is trying to become a live service game now. Here's the list of all the games that Sony has struggled to make live service. Of course, the first that has to be mentioned is Concord, but that's not it. We also have The Last of Us Online, Spider-Man: The Great Web, and Twisted Metal, all being added to the list of the Wall of Shame for Sony in their struggles to create these live service video games. But even amidst their incredible struggles, they're not stopping. In fact, their company is still very much profitable, even after taking multi-$100 million losses with Concord and several of these other live service games. They're still a profitable company, bringing new meaning to failing upwards. And their push and desire for more live service games is not satiated just yet. They're going to try and push out some more live service games. This article reads, Sony's live service push may have been disastrous, but it isn't stopping. Sony's push for more live service video games has been a point of contention among fans and the wider gaming community for some time. Ever since Jim Ryan announced his grand plans to put more live service projects in development, it has felt like a disaster in the making. True, these were famous last words here for Jim Ryan. The inherent fickle nature of live service products and the immense amount of resources needed to not only make them good out of the gate, but sustain them for a long time means they're almost impossible to get right. And that is a very interesting point to note with these live service games. You basically have to capture lightning in a bottle twice. You have to have a game launch right out of the gate very successfully, which we've seen time and time again is difficult to do. And then afterwards, the game has to be adaptable to a live service model and have its audience desire to play over an extended period of time. Not everyone wants The Last of Us to be a live service game, or even Twisted Metal for that matter. Although I will say I was a big fan of the original Twisted Metal. That game was my shit back in the day on the PlayStation 1. Of course, there have been some good live service games, including those published by PlayStation. Helldivers 2 continues to dominate the genre alongside the likes of Fortnite, Genshin Impact, and pretty much anything else made by Hoyoverse. There are plenty more, all of which tackle a different genre, but have for the most part ensured an enduring legacy by blocking out all of its competition. Sony was entering a tough market, but despite struggling to get its foot in the door, it isn't done trying, which is a very good point to make. Once a live service game exists in a particular genre, it's extremely difficult for any other game to break into that genre. Once it has created its established audience and continues to update that game, no matter what the genre is, players are going to be attached to it, and you're going to notice significant improvements year after year, no matter what the live service game is. I mean, look at Destiny 2, for example. Look at how bad Destiny 2 Year 1 was compared to where Destiny 2 is now, just in regards to the systems, the quality of life, the depth of loot, the amount of exotics in the game, the amount of weapons in the game, and armor. I mean, there is a clear night and day difference from Destiny 2 Year 1's launch to today. Even if you're burnt out on Destiny 2 right now, you can see the stark contrast there. Sony's live service push has been a disaster, from canceled projects to Concord's botched launch. It is no small secret that Sony has struggled considerably to enter the live service market with its numerous projects. Of course, there was Concord, the $400 million disaster that was pulled mere weeks after launching, before being axed completely a short while later. That felt like the death knell for all of Sony's live service efforts, but it is not done yet. And I think the key part to this here is that if you don't get your foot in the door on some of these live service games, eventually it will get ahead of you, and basically there will be like these huge juggernauts in every given genre, and they will just be these massive live service behemoths, and it would be almost impossible for any new game to enter this space. Even though video games can't be always compared to the entertainment industry in movies, I think that a good analogy can be served here where you look at like what it takes to create a movie, especially if you go back like 10 years ago, and the budget for creating a movie was so expensive that it basically gatekeeps a lot of people and their ambitions for creating new movies. No one has like $100 million sitting around to produce a movie, right? Similarly, once these live service games are established and have this like massive funding behind them, it will be very difficult for new games to launch into those spheres. Not impossible, but just extremely difficult. it is slowly taking more and more control of Bungie as it produces its own faltering live service projects like Destiny 2 and Marathon. Which is an extremely ironic twist, like I mentioned previously. They bought Bungie for $3.6 billion because Bungie was seen as the geniuses behind the live service industry. Bungie was going to provide Sony the necessary solutions required to not flop in the live service market of video games. However, the exact opposite has happened since purchasing Bungie, which I think goes to show you that even though Bungie was very early on in the live service market, they kind of stumbled into that because of dumb luck more than anything. Their game Destiny 2, upon launch, received such immense backlash and criticism that they had no choice but to pivot into something drastically new and risky, which was the live service market back in 2017, 2018. And so with a massive studio, with all of these developers on salary, and basically all the tools necessary to create content, the stars aligned and like the most perfect opportunity was created for Bungie to transform its flagship IP into a live service game, and this obviously proved extremely lucrative for them. But I do think it was random luck because Bungie is unable to reproduce this ever since. Marathon is a disaster. Countless other incubation projects that they've cooked up have been half-baked at best. Bungie has proven very clearly that they got lucky that they landed in live service when they did. In fact, the latter is already undergoing many of its own challenges, with numerous Marathon controversies forcing Sony to delay it until 2026. All of this on top of PlayStation canceling several live service projects, such as the Last of Us multiplayer game, and an alleged God of War live service title. Oh geez, they're really reaching there, aren't they? It has been a tumultuous time, to say the very least, for Sony, at least in this regard. Fortunately, it is keenly aware of this. And as we mentioned previously, even after all of these flops and failures, they're still a profitable company. So like, it just goes to show you how much money these video game companies make off of us, the consumers. They can literally fail and tank countless of these projects and still make billions of dollars. Like, the gaming industry is such a crazy lucrative industry that countless studios, Bungie included, basically took on the idea of like, why don't we just try and make every type of video game? After COVID and they saw a massive increase in revenue, they just decided to create like half a dozen crazy incubation projects for no reason, all of which failed and resulted in them needing to lean heavily back on their flagship IP, which is Destiny 2. Which even that game is now struggling in terms of population at least. During a Q&A session as part of Sony's 2025 Q1 earnings presentation, Sony's CFO, Lin Tao, explained how somewhat negative news has been coming out about its live service efforts, especially Concord and Marathon. Somewhat negative news? Somewhat. I'm not sure if you've been living in a cave, Lin Tao, but Concord was the biggest piece of dog shit in gaming history. And your company's name, Sony, is plastered all over it. And Marathon is literally about to be Concord 2.0. I understand there's an age-old expression which is, any publicity is good publicity, but not when it comes to selling a product to consumers. Marathon is extremely popular and well-known now because of its controversies, but nobody is going to pay the $40 price tag for this game. So you can look at the metrics of engagement and be like, hey, wow, yeah, everyone's talking about this Marathon thing. Bungie must be doing something right. But when it comes to launch day, when 12 people buy this game, you're going to wake up and realize that it wasn't somewhat negative news. She went on to elaborate that in terms of the transformation, it's not entirely going smoothly. Yeah, not entirely going smoothly is putting it lightly. I mean, it's basically like a dumpster fire that was hurled on top of a train. Yeah, it's not going entirely smoothly is kind of underplaying the situation a little bit, all right? Marathon and Concord is basically a dumpster fire that got put onto a train that wrecked itself into a sewage management facility. Yeah, it's not entirely going smoothly. Marathon and Concord, one is a dumpster fire and the other is an absolute train wreck. Ostensibly admitting that, as the fans have been witnessing for the past 5 years, its live service games haven't lived up to expectations. Yes, they haven't. You have no clue how to navigate the live service market. I think that these video game companies, they have a certain structure to them, and the way that a live service game has to be managed, it's a significantly more intricate process that requires a lot more attention to detail and QA efforts than maybe your average video game development process. Like, you can see how shit really hits the fan quickly in Destiny 2, right? Every time there's like a major update, randomly there will be like 12 things that are broken. And then somehow there'll be 6 other things that are broken that were previously broken before but fixed, and now they're broken again. And then all of a sudden activities that haven't even been touched by the development don't even work anymore, like the dungeon duality is just suddenly broken with the Edge of Fate. Vault of Glass randomly crashes your game. Managing a live service game is a very tricky and difficult process to pull off, but obviously it's the most lucrative one. It's the one that Sony wants. It's the one that Microsoft wants. If you want to make the big bucks, if you want your game to not die, you go live service right now. And if you can't make it in the live service market, well, you can try for the box service style, but it's even more risky because you just have everything invested up front, and if the game doesn't sell well, then you don't get to recoup any of the losses. Sony's live service games aren't going anywhere. They accounted for 40% of revenue in Q1 2025. Wow. This is what I'm talking about when I say live service games are the future. Live service games are why every studio is pushing towards that. Even games that you're like, this doesn't need to be a live service game. They're like, yeah, we're going to make it one anyways. They are just so lucrative, and this number is only going to grow so much more. I would be willing to bet that by 2030, it's going to be like 80% of the revenue is live service games. While some may see this rather honest admission as an indication that perhaps Sony should wind down its live service efforts, after all, there's little chance of beating the competition at this point. That is not happening. Yeah, we're talking about Microsoft here, the 3-point-something trillion juggernaut. In fact, it seems like live service PlayStation games are staying and are likely to for quite a long time. That's because, as Tao explained to the shareholders during the Q&A session, for Q1, the live service revenue ratio was about 40%. This is where the trends are heading. This is where video game is heading. It's also like a psychological thing that goes along with these video games, where you kind of want a return on your investment. So if you load into a game and play it for a period of time, you want there to be achievements in that game, maybe even loot in that game, things that you've accomplished in the game to stay there, versus if the game dies or goes away, then you kind of lose all of that. Not to mention whatever it is that brings you to the game in the first place, right? Like, let's say it's the graphics, let's say it's the narrative, let's say whatever it is, the gunplay, whatever brings you into a game in the first place could also consistently add new content so that it could keep you in the game week after week, month after month, year after year. I mean, after all, it intrigued you for one moment. Why couldn't it intrigue you for a whole year? Strategically speaking, the live service industry is the smartest way for these games to go. The only problem is that they have proven to be extremely volatile and difficult to handle. And Sony signed on Bungie to help them navigate this, and they have truly let them down every step of the way. That's a staggering amount of money, and something that Sony can't ignore. It clearly saw the potential that every other developer has been attempting to chase, which is why it bought Bungie for billions back in 2022, this is what I'm talking about, and is finally finding success with the model. Of course, that success may not be sustainable in the long run, especially if its currently announced projects like Marathon flop at launch like Concord. Sony can't afford to do that, as should it. I suspect its live service efforts will likely collapse. As much as 40% is incredibly impressive, Tao admits that revenue from live service games only made up between 20 and 30% for the full year. So Sony could potentially shift into being like a box service game company, and that's fine for them. I imagine that will still be a lucrative market to exist in. I'm not saying that people don't want to play those style of games. It's just it's not as lucrative as the live service. And so what you'll find is that Microsoft will own all of the live service games, and then when they pick and choose to make any sort of box service style, they'll have the budget to do so. They'll just make it happen. Basically, the company that owns the majority of live service games is the big power player here in the game industry. They control all the moves on the chessboard, and Sony is trying to recoup some of that power by having at least a handful of valuable live service games. That's still a lot of money it will want to chase, but perhaps not enough to warrant spending hundreds of millions of dollars on projects it eventually cancels, are pulled shortly after launch, or fail to make a substantial return fast enough. If Sony's continue its live service push, which, to be absolutely clear, it will be for the foreseeable future, it needs to learn from its mistakes. It not just needs to learn from its mistakes, I think they should consolidate. I think they should try to make a few of their live service games incredible, one of those being Destiny 2. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because I know a lot of you play Destiny 2. But if Sony could invest a massive amount of money and developmental effort into this game to making it a juggernaut game, Basically, if Sony made Destiny 2 its flagship game for live service, get up to 2,000 developers making Destiny 2. A consistent flow of content, new player experience is incredible. This could pave the path for other games, or at least if Sony wants to have just at least a handful of successful live service games, Destiny 2 should be one of them. Destiny 2 has proven that it is absolutely the right genre of game for live service. I don't think anyone out there watching this would enjoy losing all of their loot and having Destiny 3, Destiny 4. Imagine if every year you just got a new Destiny game. It might sound interesting at first until you realize that all your loot would just be gone every year. And all those emblems that you earned wouldn't carry over, or cosmetics that you bought in Eververse. It's problematic, right? It's very problematic. Destiny 2 belongs as a live service game. In fact, Destiny 2 died as a box service game. It launched as box service and fully died completely. They almost went completely belly up before transitioning to live service. It was literally live service that saved Destiny 2. So to try to separate the live service from Destiny, or to say that Destiny 2 and live service don't go together, is completely antithetical. Tao outright stated this during the QA session, stating that we recognize that there are still issues, many issues, so we should learn from these mistakes and make sure that we introduce live service content where there's less waste and more smooth. I agree with this. Not every game should be a live service game. There are some that just maybe a little more compatible for that type of environment. The live service element does kind of suck the soul out of a game to some degree, right? You understand that there's a company behind it that's sort of pushing out these updates and trying to hit these sort of monetization marks. And so the narrative of the game is pushing onward every month, every week, etc. And while the writers of these stories and these narratives are very talented and very passionate about their stories, they are heavily incentivized monetarily to keep the story going, no matter the outcome, right? And basically a good story always has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every good story you've ever heard your whole life had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But live service games don't end. So it's inherently difficult to create good narratives in them because you have a beginning and then just a middle and then a middle and then a middle and then some more middle and then more middle and then it never comes to an end. Or in the case of Destiny 2, when it does kind of come to an end with the final shape, it then just jumps right back into the middle again with the Edge of Fate. The Edge of Fate was meant to be a re-entry point for Destiny 2 players or an entry point for brand new players. But instead, you're thrown into this narrative and you may not even understand or know who these characters are. Very little backstory is given to you, and you're basically just given the conclusion that you're in the middle of a story once again, that The Witness was the end of a thread of a narrative, but not the end of the whole narrative. The Witness was the end of the Light and Darkness saga, but elements of that saga carry on into the new saga, the Fate saga. So basically, it's just the middle. We're still in the middle. And we'll always be in the middle because it's a live service game. It never ends. There are several upcoming PlayStation live service projects, and Sony continues to form teams to develop them. It has poured so much money, time, and resources into these projects, and it cannot afford to keep canceling them. Of course, it also can't afford to spend years and years developing them. That's likely why so many in-development projects were canceled, as they potentially would not have met the high standards now expected had they been released on time. One can hope that anything in development from here on will have learned from Sony's past live service mistakes. Of course, like many fans, I'm torn about PlayStation's live service efforts. As much as Helldivers 2 was incredible, it proved, alongside Concord's failure, that contemporary live service games have to offer something unique to succeed. It isn't enough to simply chase trends anymore, as so many now defunct studios have discovered. Sony's games are always of an extremely high quality, but they can often be derivative of what is popular at the time. Horizon Zero Dawn has an incredibly unique setting, but its combat feels like simplified Monster Hunter, and its exploration is akin to other open-world third-person games. Ghost of Tsushima is similar to Assassin's Creed, and even God of War feels like it's aping the style of its other first-party linear narrative-based adventures like Uncharted. It needs to break away from inspiration if it wants to succeed and offer high-quality but unique experiences. I believe Sony can do this eventually, but whether it has time to spend perfecting it remains to be seen. That's an interesting note they've made there in regards to Sony is basically, they're behind in the race for video games and video game development, and it's noticeable. And whenever you're behind in situations like this, you're just playing this never-ending game of catch-up. And once people figure out what's going on and what's happening here, they're just going to play the games that they like more. I do feel like Sony is in a really difficult predicament. They gambled by purchasing Bungie and lost, I don't think that their company is going to go under anytime soon. I mean, they're very profitable. They have billions of dollars, and historically, they've made some pretty good decisions. I just think they're in a very difficult predicament. They're trying to compete in a live service market where Microsoft just is so powerful, it's ridiculous. Not to mention that, but also Trump is placing tariffs on foreign companies. So Sony, being a Japanese company, literally will have tariffs on their video games, making it even more difficult for them to be profitable, and also making it significantly more profitable to be an American company, i.e. Microsoft. It's going to be a very rough next couple of years for Sony if I had to predict things. I don't know how they're going to crawl themselves out of this hole. If you enjoyed this video, then click on the screen here to watch another one from this channel. And don't forget that we're doing a monthly emblem giveaway for anyone that is subscribed with notifications on, likes, and comments on the video. We'll be scrolling through all the comments, picking random winners. So best of luck to you out there, and we appreciate you watching. See you in the next one.